Chapter 1. The Road to the Sea. Arlo and the Secret of the Old Lighthouse. The morning broke slowly in the highlands, as if the sun itself had forgotten the path to rise. The sky, stained in lavender and ash, stretched above a sleeping world, where frost clung to every blade of grass and silence rested heavy like a memory not yet remembered. In a valley cradled by the shoulders of tall fir trees and ancient stone, a lone figure stirred beneath the low eaves of a crumbling farmhouse. It was Arlo, the old Anatolian shepherd. His fur, thick and coarse, had once gleamed golden in the light of summers long past. Now it was grayed by time and laced with burrs and pine needles, a patchwork of seasons worn like a shroud. His legs were stiff when he rose, joints creaking like the wood beneath his paws. Yet there was no hesitation in his movement, only a quiet resolve, the kind forged through decades of waiting and watching. He sniffed the air. It was different today. The earth whispered. It wasn't a voice, not really. More a sensation, a pulse, a calling. Something beyond the ridge, beyond the fields, beyond the places he had ever roamed. A scent older than time and stronger than fear. Sea salt. Though Arlo had never seen the ocean, the essence of it had once clung to a man's coat, years ago. That man, the only human he had ever loved, had vanished one summer without returning, his boots leaving no prints in the dried dust. But Arlo remembered that coat, damp with fog, smelling of driftwood and gulls and distance. Now, on this still and trembling morning, that scent returned, borne on a current too subtle for human senses. But Arlo felt it, deep in his ribs. He lifted his great head and stared toward the horizon. Somewhere far beyond the hills and rivers and woods, the sea was breathing. He knew he had to go. The decision was not one of thought, but instinct, as certain and irreversible as the fall of dusk. Arlo moved from the porch and crossed the frost-bound earth, passing the rotted fence, the old plow swallowed by weeds, the lone apple tree that no longer bore fruit. Each step was a farewell, though he didn't linger. He had no time for memory, only motion. A raven cawed from a crooked branch and took flight overhead. The wind was soft, carrying scents like letters from distant lands, cedar bark, a fox's den, distant smoke, and somewhere, faint and pulling, brine and kelp. He walked through the sleeping pastures. The long grasses bowed beneath the cold. Once, these fields had been his kingdom. He had guarded sheep here in his youth, patrolled them with tireless devotion, barked into storms, chased away wolves with the fury of something greater than a dog. But the sheep were gone now, and the wolves had moved elsewhere. Only the earth remained. And Arlo. By midday he had crossed the ridgeline and descended into the old forest. Pines towered on all sides, their trunks straight and solemn like pillars in a forgotten cathedral. The light here was dim, filtered in slivers through moss-draped branches. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses into the ears, makes the heart beat louder. Arlo moved silently. His massive paws found the softest patches of earth, instinctively avoiding the branches and dry leaves. Here, his body remembered the paths he had walked long ago, when his legs had been swifter and his breath steadier. Even now, in age, he moved with purpose. He passed an abandoned trap, rusted teeth frozen open in eternal hunger. Further on, a broken bridge spanned a black stream, the water beneath it as still as glass. He paused, watching his reflection ripple and dissolve. What stared back was a wolf made of stone and sorrow, with eyes that had seen too many winters. At dusk, the forest began to thin, the trees growing shorter, scrubbier. He came upon a clearing where the wind changed, colder now, with a ghost of salt upon it. He raised his head and stood for a long time, letting it wash over him. A memory stirred, not sharp like a picture but hazy, like smoke. The man's hand resting on his head, the rough wool of a fisherman's sweater, the smell of fish and fire and fog. He did not stop for the night. The stars came out, one by one, small and glinting through the cloud breaks. The moon was a pale coin above the hills. Arlo walked beneath it like a shadow with purpose, an old sentinel returning to something he couldn't name. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Forest Edge. Arlo and the Secret of the Old Lighthouse. The forest behind him was hushed, swallowed by night and memory. Ahead, the path wound through lands that bore no name, only shape. hills like sleeping beasts, creeks that gurgled like old songs, and trees twisted by wind and time. The world had shifted. Every step pulled Arlo deeper into a realm that was not wilderness nor dream, but something between. The dawn came late and pale, veiled in thick mist. It crept across the ground in low swirls, coiling around Arlo's paws as he moved. The sky above was the color of worn wool, and the sun no more than a brighter blur behind the clouds. Arlo walked slowly now, not from pain, though his bones ached, but from something subtler. A sense, a weight, as if each breath of fog carried within it a memory pressing against his ribs. He passed through a thicket of alder trees, their bark like ashen bones, their branches clawing at the mist. Birds did not sing here. The world had grown still, holding itself in a kind of breathless waiting. Arlo paused beside an old stone well, half swallowed by brambles. Water glimmered at its depths, though no bucket remained. He lowered his head and drank. The water was cold and clear and tasted of deep time, as though it had been waiting centuries to be touched again. Then he saw them, not with his eyes, but with the part of him that remembered. Ghosts of sheep, thin, flickering shapes, wool white as snow, drifting just beyond the mist. They moved without sound, grazing across the empty field. For a moment, he stood as he once had, watchful, alert, protective. His body lifted instinctively, ears raised, breath held. But they were not real. They vanished with the wind. He continued. Hours passed, maybe more. Time no longer moved in hours or minutes, but in sensations, a patch of thawed moss underfoot, the cry of a hawk above, the shape of a broken cart overgrown with vines. The fog lifted slightly by midday, revealing a landscape scarred and strange. Half-fallen fences, stone walls laced with ivy, an orchard, long dead, its trees curled inward like old men in prayer. Arlo entered what remained of a village, though village was a generous word now. Just 4 buildings stood, 2 missing their roofs. The wind had long since taken the names from their signs, and no scent of man remained. Except one. Faint. Old. Familiar. The scent of oilskin and fish. Of salt and pipe smoke. It hung in the doorway of the smallest house, almost erased by rain and time. Arlo stood there for a long moment, tail still, breath silent. Then he moved on. Underscore. That evening, he reached the edge of the trees. Before him lay a wide marshland, golden-brown reeds whispering under the breeze, puddles reflecting the fading sky. It was neither land nor water, but a shifting in-between. Somewhere beyond it, hidden behind the low hills, the sea waited. He took his first step into the marsh. The ground squelched beneath him. Cold mud wrapped around his paws. A heron lifted silently from the reeds, wings wide, vanishing into the dusk. Here, the smells changed again. More salt now, and decay. The scent of old wood, of drift and bone, of something returned from far away. He moved carefully, avoiding the deeper pools. With every step, the horizon seemed to shift until he no longer knew where he had come from. Only the wind remained consistent, always pushing gently forward, always calling. When night fell, it was moonless. Arlo lay down beneath a gnarled willow at the edge of the marsh. His body sank into the earth, heavy with fatigue, heavy with thought. His eyes closed, but he did not sleep. He dreamed, but not like before. Underscore. He saw a shoreline at dusk. Not in this time, in another. Long ago. He was a pup, soaked with rain, trembling. A hand lifted him, strong and warm. A coat wrapped around him. The smell of fish, fire, and brine. The man's voice, though Arlo could never understand the words, was low and steady, like the sea in calm weather. They had sat by a fire together, the lighthouse rising behind them like a finger pointing at the stars. Then the dream broke. A sound. Real. Arlo's ears perked. It was far off, barely audible, like a bell. Faint. Rusted. Moving with the wind. He rose, heart slow and steady. Tomorrow, he would reach the lighthouse. But tonight, The wind carried its shadow. Chapter 3. Wind from the Ocean. The dawn that followed was born from gray silk. The sky unrolled in a pale hush, without sun or color, only light, diffuse and uncertain. The marsh behind Arlo steamed faintly in the morning chill, its reeds stirring like sleepwalkers in a shallow dream. Fog clung to his back, reluctant to release him, as though nature itself feared what lay ahead. He climbed the last hill slowly, his breath steady, though his legs trembled slightly beneath the weight of the journey. The wind had changed. It came now in long sighs from the west, cleaner, wilder, laced with salt and vastness. The smells it carried had no anchor in land. They came from somewhere beyond comprehension. Kelp, stone, foam, flight, cold iron, and sun-warmed shells. All of it new, and yet impossibly familiar. And then he saw it. The ocean. It was not what he had imagined. Not roaring or blue or sharp with light, but something greater. A presence. A body too large for the eye to measure, lying flat and still and endless beneath the pale sky. It stretched out to the ends of vision, breathing in waves that rose and fell like the slow beating of the earth's heart. Arlo stood motionless. The wind rushed past his ears, through the coarse fur of his neck, down the line of his spine. He did not bark. He did not move. He only watched, as if watching was a form of prayer. The sea was the great mirror, and in it he saw nothing of himself. Only time, and distance, and return. He stepped forward. The hill dipped sharply into dry coastal heath, a land of low shrubs and sparse grass, flattened by the wind, the soil sandy and soft. Small white flowers trembled close to the ground. The cries of seabirds spiraled above, gulls and cormorants and unseen others, their voices raw with distance. Arlo walked with care now. The air was louder here, more alive. It wrapped around him, pulled at his coat, stung his eyes with its clarity. There were no trees, no fences, no scent of man, only the open. And on the edge of the horizon, there it stood, the lighthouse, far off still, thin, weathered, reaching toward the sky like a bone left behind by some ancient giant. It stood upon a low cliff at the very edge of the continent, surrounded by gorse and rock and the roaring hush of the sea. His body responded before thought did. His steps became firmer, more certain. Each one carried the weight of years, of memory, of something left unfinished. He did not know what waited there, but he knew it was waiting. Understood. By midday the wind picked up, turning sharp and biting, tasting of storm. The clouds thickened into sheets of steel. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled like a giant shifting in its sleep. Arlo found shelter among the remains of a broken boat, lying half-buried in the sand dunes. Its hull, cracked and split, leaned like a wounded beast against the dune's curve. Seaweed curled along its ribs. A gull perched silently on its stern, unafraid. He entered the hollow space beneath the bow and lay down. There, the wind sang in the cracks. The smell of salt and tar and old wood pressed into his fur. He closed his eyes but did not sleep. He listened. The sea moved with rhythm, as ancient as bone. It did not speak, but it told stories. Arlo felt them. Tales of driftwood and whales, storms and shipwrecks, the weight of moons on water, the silence of the deeps. One wave, another still. He remembered the sound of his master's boots on wet stone, the clink of a lantern against an iron railing, the hush of a voice, not words, but feeling. And always, that smell, sea and wool and warmth. Night fell early. The clouds thickened, pressing low. The lighthouse light, though still far, flickered faintly through the dark, not in warning, not in guidance, but in memory. Arlo rose. He left the boat and began the final part of his journey. The wind howled now, wild with sudden strength. Sand bit at his flanks. Rain began, first as mist, then as a driving curtain. The ground beneath him turned slick. But he did not falter. The path curved along the cliffs. Below, waves crashed against rock, white and furious. He could feel the spray on his face. The lighthouse grew larger, more real. The air around it shimmered, charged with something nameless, as if the place remembered him too. He reached the bottom of the final slope just before midnight. There, in the shadow of the cliff, He paused. The lighthouse loomed above him, tall, narrow, gray with lichen and age. Its windows were dark. Its door hung open slightly, creaking in the wind. The wind tugged at it with fingers made of sea. Arlo stood still. His body, soaked and tired, vibrated with something more than cold. The storm moved around him, but inside was stillness. A pause in time. He looked up. The lighthouse light flared once, then went dark. Chapter 4. The Lighthouse and the Silence. The wind screamed above the cliffs. It tore at the broken grasses, howled through the jagged rocks, and flung sea spray high into the air. Waves crashed far below, white teeth gnawing the land. But within the old lighthouse, there was no sound, only the stillness. Arlo stepped across the threshold. The door creaked on its hinges, not in protest, but in greeting. Inside, the air was thick with damp and dust, layered with the scent of rust, salt, and time. Everything was touched by the sea. The walls, the floorboards, the old coats hanging like ghosts by the door. Even the light, thin and silver, carried the weight of water. He moved slowly, not out of fear, but reverence. The lighthouse interior was narrow and tall. A winding iron stair clung to the curved wall, spiraling upward into shadow. Its steps were rusted, their paint peeled by decades of wind. Old boots rested beneath the stairs, filled with dust. A lantern hung from a hook, its glass cracked. Arlo paused near the center of the room. There, beneath a heavy woolen blanket, slumped across a low wooden bench, was a coat. The coat, even after all these years, it carried the memory of one scent, faint but unmistakable. That man, his man, the one who had held him by the fire, the one who had vanished into silence. Arlo pressed his nose gently to the wool. His eyes closed, and for a moment, the years fell away. He was small again, cold and rain-soaked, tucked beneath that same coat while gulls wheeled overhead. The smell of pipe smoke, the warmth of a hand, the quiet of being known. He opened his eyes. The silence remained. He moved further in. The room bore no signs of recent life. No food, no firewood, no warmth. Just the fragments of a world long buried. A rusted compass, a broken clock, a journal warped by moisture and time. Its pages curled inward like sleeping petals. Arlo nosed the book open. The ink was faded. The words bled. But he could smell them, not with his nose, but with the part of him that remembered. The man's hands had turned these pages. The scent of oil, the roughness of calloused fingers. Some pages held pressed leaves. One held a strand of fur. His fur. He looked up. A small window, no larger than a bird's wing, stared westward. Through it, he could see the sea stretching endlessly beneath the storm. The light from above, the great beacon, was unlit. Something stirred within him. Not urgency, not fear, but a pull, like a tide moving inside his chest. Slowly, steadily, he turned toward the stairs. Each step was a groan, iron against iron. He climbed, paw after paw, breath measured, body aching. The spiral narrowed as he rose, until the world below disappeared entirely. At the top, he reached the glass chamber. The lantern was there, tall and still, its mechanism silent, lenses covered in salt film. Rain tapped against the windows. The storm howled beyond, but in here, it was quiet. He circled the room once, and then he lay down, not because he was tired, though he was, but because this was the place everything had led to. Not a destination, a return. From here, he could see the shoreline curve like a sleeping creature. The marshes, the dunes, the long dark ribbon of forest, all of it behind him now. He rested his head on his paws. In the silence, he heard things he had forgotten. The low hum of the man's voice, the rhythm of waves on stone, the creak of rope, the hush of winter snow falling on an empty field, and beneath it all, the beat of his own heart. A slow, steady drum, not fading, just still. Chapter 5. The Light That Never Fades. The storm passed in the night. By morning, the world was washed clean. The sky was open, the color of pale glass, with the faintest blush of dawn pressed against the edge of the sea. The wind had quieted to a whisper, and the great tide rolled in and out in slow, even breaths, as though the ocean itself had fallen into sleep. Arlo remained in the glass room at the top of the lighthouse. He had not moved since the night before. His body lay still, stretched upon the floorboards worn smooth by generations of steps. His fur, damp and salt-matted, glistened faintly in the new light. Around him, the chamber held a silence not of emptiness, but of reverence. A silence that belonged in sacred places. Outside, gulls wheeled overhead. The air was sharp with brine, but beneath it was something softer, a scent like wild thyme, like dry wool, like memory. Arlo opened his eyes. The morning found him there, alive, but changed. He no longer felt the pressure of time in his limbs. The ache of the journey had faded. His breath moved in and out gently, as though the lighthouse itself was breathing with him. There was no longer any sense of urgency, only being. He rose slowly, one final time, and he turned to face the sea. From this height, the world unfurled in all directions. The dark trees of the inland ridge, the marshes glinting with dew, the broken boat lying like a relic in the dunes. He saw it all, not as a path to return to, but as something whole, a circle drawn and closed. He lowered his head, not in exhaustion, but in thanks. Then, without sound or command, the lantern above him flickered. It had not been touched. No hand had lit it. No mechanism had stirred. And yet, within the great housing of glass and steel, a glow began to gather. Not flame, not electricity, but something quieter, older, like memory given shape. The light grew gently, filling the room with warmth. Outside, seabirds cried and wheeled. The grasses along the cliffs bowed in the morning wind. Below, on the trail that twisted from the sea to the lighthouse door, mist began to rise. Not fog now, but a silver breath that shimmered, full of motion. And then Arlo saw him, not with his eyes, but with whatever part of the soul remembers beyond time. A figure standing at the base of the lighthouse, broad-shouldered, quiet, a coat flapping gently in the breeze. One hand rested on the stone wall, as if to say, "I am here. I never left." The scent was unmistakable. Wool, salt, fire, and love. Arlo did not bark. He did not run. He simply stood, and in that stillness, the two of them met once more. A reunion beyond voice, beyond even the years. A moment that did not pass, because it did not need to. Time passed. The sun climbed higher. The sea turned to silver. And by noon, the lighthouse stood bright against the sky, no longer abandoned, but inhabited by light. The wind moved through the grasses and carried the scent of something eternal. No one saw the great dog descend the stairs. No one heard the soft footsteps over the worn wood floor. But in the stillness, something changed. A presence, once waiting, had found rest. And on the horizon, far beyond the reach of sight, the waves carried the echo of paws walking home.